All right, welcome everybody to our Wednesday Bible study. We're glad that you are here with us, or you've joined us via live stream on the Bible study Facebook group or YouTube, wherever you're watching this. We are in 1 Samuel. We have rode the roller coaster that is 1 Samuel. We have met all kinds of different people. We've gone to all different kinds of places. We've seen some personalities that we look at and we say, hey, I want to be that kind of person. And then we see some other personalities where we go, oh, come on. Surely this isn't how it's going to be with you. Surely there's going to be that redemptive arc where you do the wrong thing, but you come back around to do the right thing, and we don't see that. So today we come to the story with a capital T, the one in 1 Samuel, which everyone right off understands, knows, hears when they think of the name David. It's the pivotal David and Goliath story. And perhaps we feel in our hearts, I've heard this 1,000 times, I've seen it on the flannel board, I've seen the cartoon, and I know this by heart. This story isn't going to hold much for me. But because I say that with confidence, because I was that person as I was reading through this. They're like, oh, this will be easy, but I'll go through my regimen of kind of studying this as I did, and I'm finding that this chapter holds a lot more than perhaps we realize, and I'm really excited to get into it, because having gone through, if we just step into David and Goliath, having not read through the prior chapters, we miss out on a lot. We miss out on the personality of certainly Saul, who this guy is about, what his worldview and what his goals are. But we also get a taste of who David is. Even just in this past chapter, we get to see who David is at his heart. So let's begin. Let's start with chapter 17 of 1 Samuel and see what the word has for us. 17. Now the Philistines gathered their forces for war and assembled at Soko in Judah. So again, we have the Philistines who are coming out against the people of Israel, and they're not just out for a walk. They're not just going on some pleasure tour of the countryside. They are assembling for war, and they've assembled in Judah. They pitched their camp at Ephes Damim between Soko and Azekah. Saul and the Israelites assembled and camped in the valley of Elah and drew up their battle line to meet the Philistines. The Philistines occupied one hill and the Israelites another, with the valley between them. What an iconic picture that we have. Two armies assembled for battle, each having in their own respective places the high ground, with the battlefield laying before them in a valley. They both hold an advantage if the other would seek to overcome its adversary. They would have to fight up, and the one that had the high ground, of course, has the natural advantage. And so the battle must first occur in the valley below. A champion named Goliath, who was from Gath, came out of the Philistine camp. He was over 9 feet tall. He had a bronze helmet on his head and wore a coat of scale armor of bronze weighing 5,000 shekels on his legs. Weighing 5,000 shekels, comma. On his legs he wore bronze greaves, and a bronze javelin was slung on his back. His spear shaft was like a weaver's rod, and its iron point weighed 600 shekels. His shield bearer went out ahead of him. So they have, these Philistines, they have among their number not just mighty warriors, but one who is gigantic. We might even want to throw around the term giant. But this individual, and so there's conjecture. Perhaps we're getting the translation of ancient measurement mixed up. But no matter what number we come to, what we have here, we have 9 feet tall. That would fit the narrative, certainly. Whether he's 7, 8, or 9 feet, he is enormous. He is gigantic. He is an imposing figure. And his armor weighs, I'm sure if you have notes, you can see that his armor itself weighs 125 pounds.
Yeah, you must have my foot.
9 feet. You'd have to be north of 8 feet if your armor in this day and time. I mean, would weigh 125 pounds. I mean, you're wearing the weight of an 8th grader on your body as armor. It's unbelievable.
Can you imagine how big his armor bearer is? Because he had to carry that shield. So he's no little guy. He's a big, strong guy.
Exactly. Imagine an armor bearer. You're probably thinking of a young lad who's carrying things. But in this case, you have to summon a warrior, someone of great strength, to have that lowly position of a shield bearer. Hey, hold this while I walk. You can't have just some little guy, some water boy on the sidelines. You need the star quarterback to come out here and carry your shield. This individual is not only a physical imposing specimen, but we have a list here of what he has. This is top of the line armor. He has all the good stuff. He has an iPhone 12 of armor. He has a PlayStation 5. I mean, he has the very most sophisticated armor at the time. We probably can imagine the Israelites having some kind of iron about their armor, but it would probably mostly constructed of leather. He has a coat of scale armor made of bronze. He has a bronze helmet for his head, and a 15-pound helmet. His helmet weighs 15 pounds.
Spearhead does too.
That's incredible. That's unbelievable. The weight that we have here. He has bronze greaves. We didn't see armor like this being the norm until Greek Empire, Roman Empire. So they threw all that they had at this one guy. They're putting all their eggs in the basket of Goliath.
I also read that there was 6 layers of each of his armor, and that's where they got the number 666
That's
from.
what my footnote said.
That's
Identifies the future Antichrist, the number whose name will be 666.
Yeah.
spear shaft was like a weaver's rod. Iron point, 600 shekels. Shield bearer went ahead of him. And so we have he's fully outfitted in upon his head, upon his body, upon his legs. He has on his back, he has a javelin, he has he has a spear, and we know later he has a sword, and he's got a shield. He is completely outfitted.
How did he get on a horse?
Well, here's the thing. I can't imagine he could ride any sort of beast of burden. That if he wanted to go about it easily, he had to have seat himself upon a cart of some kind and have many horses pull him along, which I wouldn't think would be too much to think. Well, why would they let some warrior do that? Because he is the warrior. He is the capital T, the warrior. The Philistines in this time have Goliath as their champion, and so now that we have in our minds, we have fully realized who this Goliath is. We continue forward. Goliath stood and shouted to the ranks of Israel, "Why do you come out and line up for battle? Why do you even try? Why are you arrayed in all your little armor, and you've got your little tents, and you've got your little swords? Why do you even come out for battle? Am I not a Philistine, and are you not the servants of Saul? Choose a man and have him come down to me. If he is able to fight and kill me, we will become your subjects. But if I overcome him and you kill him, you will become our subjects and serve us." So this is a wise military decision that you have high ground, I have high ground, and let's not get into battle just yet. Why don't you send out one of your folks? Now, if this was just a regular regular guy, the best warrior they could sum up, who was of average or even above average, this would be, this is a good idea. This is a fair fight, best against best. That's good. But with Goliath, it's a shoe-in. Hey, you can send anybody you want out here. In our current day and time, in the modern age, we have not seen, with photographic evidence, anyone who has achieved 9 feet.
It says here, I didn't know this, I mean, I knew the fallen angels bred with the people on earth and
The story of the Nephilim,
yeah,
right?
And it says Goliath was one of the last giants, which were a product between fallen angels and the women through an effort of Satan to corrupt bloodline.
Yeah. Again, we don't have anything there, and so we have to kind of follow conjecture. But those are that's. We don't have modern examples of someone who's 9 feet. We have people that have breached the 8-foot mark. I believe 8.5 feet is about as high as we've seen. Photographic evidence and medically, can see that. But 9 feet, it's just
nursing
unbelievable.
School in California, Loma Linda had, their where they have those things on exhibits, and I'm pretty sure there was a 10.
Talk a little louder.
Yeah, I was pretty sure there was a 10-foot skeleton on display there.
Oh wow! And so
They
that may be
display
something
all
as
the
well.
large abnormalities.
Anthropologists may have evidence, but
Yeah.
in modern day we don't.
Yeah.
So let's follow that a line just a little bit.
Who was the tallest that they had on their side? Saul.
Exactly. That is why. He dropped Saul's name specifically. Why have you come out? And why do you line up for battle? I'm a Philistine, and not, he didn't say you're the Israelites. Aren't you the servants of Saul, the one who is ahead above all of you, the one who is strong, and the one who is a warrior? What he desires is for Saul to come out and face him, because he would then be able to cut down the king. What greater honor than not only to cut down the best they could sum up, but their king. Now, let's open that box. What would have happened if Saul had strode out there with his armor? We know he's got some armor. He's got a sword. What if he strode out there and said, I'm going to face you down? And let's say he was, as we could see would happen, he would have been cut down in hand-to-hand combat with a 9-foot-tall person, somebody 3 and 4 feet taller than he is. But then the army, having witnessed their king cut down, would have had 2 choices: to be dismayed or to be enraged, and to leap upon the Philistines with all, you've cut down before us our king. This is going to be the end of you. Had Saul had the gumption to do that, because that is the place of a king, to do that in this place. But Saul, all we hear of Saul, he's back in some tent. He's doing the looking at maps, and he's doing his strategy, and he's finding his tactics, but not once has he laid his hand upon a sword. Just a thought of mine. What would have happened if Saul strode out there? Not only am I a warrior, not only am I a head taller than all these guys, but I'm coming after you. I'm not scared of you. But that didn't happen. And we know that Goliath is not anywhere close to the height of Saul, because Saul would have been called a giant himself. This is of course, even if we are wrong about 9 feet, if our measurements of shekels is changed, this individual, Goliath, is tall. Very tall.
But been a product of a fallen angel and an earthly woman too.
Well, being a head taller, that's certainly just average genetics having their way. Then we have no. That would have to be conjecture. We have no literary evidences of anything like that.
But he came from a land of giants.
And the giants were products
Because
of fallen
when they
angels.
came to the promised land, they were afraid to go over because of all the giants in that area. And they were told, Joshua was told to go in and to get rid of all those people, which didn't happen. Lots were got rid of. But
Right.
there were a lot of giants left, so I'm assuming he was
Yeah, he was a
Pretty tall.
Benjaminite, and so I mean we have a real scene before us, and Goliath is one who knows what he's doing. If on the unlikely opportunity that your person can defeat me, well then we will be your servants. This whole army will lay down our swords and we'll be your servants. But quid pro quo, you do it, and it'll work out. On hearing the Philistines' words, Saul and all the Israelites were dismayed and terrified. Saul, the king, the one who's supposed to lead the charge and be an example, well, he is dismayed and terrified along with all of his servants. You servants of Saul. Now, and so that sets the scene. Here comes someone we've just learned about in the last chapter, this young shepherd boy named David. Verse 12. Now David was the son of an Ephrathite named Jesse, who was from Bethlehem in Judah. Jesse had 8 sons, and in Saul's time he was old and well advanced in his years. Jesse's 3 oldest sons had followed Saul to the war. The firstborn was Eliab, the second Abinadab, and the third Shammah. David was the youngest. The 3 oldest followed Saul, but David went back and forth from Saul to tend his father's sheep at Bethlehem. So we hear prior that David first is anointed king in very clandestine circumstances, that one day in the future he will be king. God has chosen him for that. And then he becomes a part of Saul's service at the palace. When Saul is tormented and needs calming down, David plays the harp for him and can calm him down. And so he is just a mere court musician. He is of no one of consequence. He's just some boy who plays the harp. And we are reintroduced because, again, conjecture that these 2 accounts come from different sources, and they're placed here as being record, where the account that we see from one is from the accounts of Bethlehem, the other are the accounts of the military. This one would be what the military accounts, and since they're under the account of Samuel, they come into play here. But we know David. We understand about him, and we see that he's in the service of Saul, and he's going between playing for Saul and attending to his father's sheep in Bethlehem. He's having to work 2 jobs. He's a musician, which is his passion, but then he has to help with the family. That sounds to me, I'm sorry, like a Hallmark movie. I just want to play guitar, and no, I have to help the family at the farm. So,
True.
yeah.
And this is in the day before the AK-47s.
This
the
is
great
true.
equalizers. That's
Yeah.
what my brother called those.
No boy. So and again, yeah, we're, he seems very far off from the battle. That he's tending sheep, and he's helping Saul, and so when Saul, we see in verse 16, for 40 days the Philistine came forward every morning and evening and took his stand. For those 40 days, we can understand that he is not being called by Saul to come play, and so there is at least a period of time where he's able to help with what's going on with his father Jesse. Now Jesse said to his son David, "Take this ephah of roasted grain and these 10 loaves of bread for your brothers and hurry to their camp. Take along these 10 cheeses to the commander of their unit. See how your brothers are and bring back some assurance from them. They are with Saul and all the men of Israel in the valley of Elah, fighting against the Philistines." So partly Jesse, the dad, he wants to know how his sons are doing, but he also needs to send provisions. We see 40 days they've been there. It's not so much a siege, but they're locked in place. The soldiers can't go and find their own sort of things, and so their families are having to send provisions to them because the army can't move. And their supply lines are probably being congested or are completely cut off because we have both these hills and we have the valley, which is a no man's land, a battlefield. And so it falls to young David to bring some roasted grain and some bread, and then we're going to bring some cheese to the commanders. It sounds like he's trying to, hey, you commanders, look after my sons here. I'm giving you some cheese. I've got some sheep. I've got some cattle. We've got some cheese.
A little bribery there.
Little bribery. Keep your strength up. Here's some cheese, and he's got some food for his brothers, and that's what David's doing. He's bringing some food. He's seeing how they are, so he can let his father know how his sons are doing. Verse 20. Early in the morning, David left the flock with a shepherd, loaded up, and set out as Jesse had directed. He reached the camp as the army was going out to its battle positions, shouting the war cry. Israel and the Philistines were drawing up their lines facing each other. David left his things with the keeper of the supplies, ran to the battle lines, and greeted his brothers. Now, that's not what he was asked to do, but that's what David surely did. He went to the quartermaster, went to the keeper of things. What kind of ambiguous job position is that? I now dub the keeper of supplies, so we can understand that's a quartermaster. He's somebody who's at the cart, he's at the tent where everything is, and he just leaves it there, sight unseen. You just, hey, look after this, okay? And he's running off to the battle line. Now he's been given specific directions by his father, but he hears the war cry. He sees everyone lining up, and he runs right into the thick of things and greets his brothers. As he was talking with them, Goliath, the Philistine champion from Gath, stepped out from his lines and shouted his usual defiance. And David heard it. When the Israelites saw the man, they all ran from him in great fear. It would seem that they daily, weekly, they go through this where they stand up and they go through the war cry, rah, and here comes Goliath, and he's like, hey, same deal, send somebody out, and they're like, nope, we don't want to do it. And they scurry away. Now the Israelites had been saying, do you see how this man keeps coming out? He comes out to defy Israel. The king will give great wealth to the man who kills him. He will also give him his daughter in marriage and will exempt his father's family from taxes in Israel. Which is, those are some very...
Big deal.
Those are some great rewards. David asked the men standing near him, what will be done for the man who kills this Philistine and removes his disgrace from Israel? Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? They repeated to him what they had been saying and told him, this is what will be done for the man who kills him. So he's wanting to okay, run that by me one more time. What are the rewards for anyone who kills this Philistine and shuts him up from disgracing the armies of the living God? When Eliab, David's oldest brother, heard him speaking with the men, he burned with anger at him and asked, why have you come down here? And with whom did you leave those few sheep in the desert? I know how conceited you are and how wicked your heart is. You came down only to watch the battle. Okay, older brother, that's the most brother-sounding thing I've ever heard. Well, you're just conceited, and you're not going to do your job, and it would seem that he may be close to some truth with David. David is having a few youthful indiscretions. He may want to get away from watching sheep and see battle and all that, but I think the brother's laying it on a little thick, perhaps. I think there's a little envy and jealousy in the heart of the oldest brother, I would say.
For the freedom that David has, that he has. Also.
You get to watch sheep all day, and I'm here clutching a spear,
Yes.
wondering what day that Philistine's going to come after me.
Right.
Now what have I done? Said David. Can't I even speak? You can imagine that Eliab is just railing against David, and he goes, Can I speak? Can I take up for myself? And then he turned away to someone else and brought up the same matter, and the men answered him as before. Here's the thing. To me, that seems just a little bit like, hey, can I speak? Can I say something? And then repeats the exact same thing his brother got mad at. Like he's goading his brother, perhaps. He's being the little brother. what David awards, I'm the one who's inquiring about them. Perhaps he didn't expect it to get all the way to Saul, but he wanted that on record. He wanted. I can call on several people, even my hothead brother who heard me asking this, that I want to know about this. I'm not one of these soldiers, but I want to be in on the loop here. And so he was sent to Saul. David said to Saul, "Let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him." Saul replied, "You're not able to go out against this Philistine and fight him. You're only a boy, and he has been a fighting man from his youth. You, sir, are just a little boy. You're a youth. And he has been a warrior from the time, from your age. There's no way we can send you out."
Also, I think at this time, Saul did not recognize him because there was a time period from when Saul did see him, like a 2-year period, and so he really did not recognize him at this time. But isn't it just like God to send in God's time? It's always in God's time.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been 2 years has passed, so, I thought that was interesting.
And this court musician is not someone that Saul is going to look at and recognize. At this point, he's not holding his harp, And when David comes into the picture, it is because Saul's tormented. He is not in his right mind, and no doubt when David leaves, he's probably asleep. He's thinking of something else. So he's no one of consequence to recognize. He probably looks like all the other little kids that are running around in his eyes. And which is only further complicated by the distance and time which he's probably last seen him. So he doesn't know him as who he is, that this is the boy that's been there.
And he wasn't there a lot. He only came when the spirits
Exactly.
affected.
Yeah, it wasn't an all the time kind of thing.
What verse are we on right now?
We are about to begin 34.
Okay.
And so Saul has just pointed out that Goliath has been fighting his whole life, and you've barely had any life to live. Verse 34, "But David said to Saul, 'Your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it, struck it, and rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I seized it by its hair, struck it, and killed it. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear. This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, because he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine.'"
Tremendous faith. Yeah.
Absolutely.
It is one that could be seen as conceited, but could also be seen as just bursting with faith. That this 9-foot tall guy is out here speaking out against the Lord, and David's not saying, "Look how strong I am. I beat up a lion." He says, I have gone up against bad circumstances before, and that was just because somebody was, a animal was carting off my father's sheep. He is speaking out against the army. He's speaking out against the Lord, and I'm not going to stand for it.
That shows money don't always speak, because he was given a lot of money, but yet David, a poor shepherd boy, through the help of God,
Indeed.
overcome his money offers.
Yeah, Goliath was sitting there on an immense amount of value with what he was wearing, and here comes David in a tunic. That's very true. That when it comes to looks, if we've learned anything from the past few chapters, the Lord does not look upon the outward, but upon the heart. And this boy has some heart. His job was to watch after the sheep, and it wasn't some little wolf, some overgrown dog. This is a lion. This is a bear. It says, "I grabbed it by the hair, and I beat on it until it died." Because I was not going to falter in my job.
Chutzpah.
Watch the sheep. I'm going to watch the sheep.
Yeah.
And
Very serious.
And he points, it would seem that he is really trying to sell to Saul, I can do this. Now his reasoning is there. I'm standing up against this one who is defying the armies of the living God, but he's also really putting the seasoning on for Saul to hear that I know what I'm doing. I'm not some foolhardy kid. He's speaking the language of Saul while also revealing to us, okay, you're not like Saul, who's just wanting to get into the thick of things. You're pretty fired up for what is being done against the defiance against the Lord. Saul said to David, "Go, and the Lord be with you." Then Saul dressed David in his own tunic. He put a coat of armor on him and a bronze helmet on his head. David fastened on his sword over the tunic and tried walking around because he was not used to them. And he said, I can't go in these, he said to Saul, because I'm not used to them. So,
Picture this little guy with this big
yeah,
stuff on.
little boy putting on his daddy's clothes.
Right.
Playing dress up.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what it is. I think that is the most succinct thing. David would be, if David were not there, he would just be playing dress up. It would be disingenuous. And
Follow the Lord and you'll come out okay.
it wasn't just Saul. Here's the thing: Saul didn't look around the army and find maybe a smaller soldier and use his armor. Again, this may show geekiness, but I recall in the Lord of the Rings that there was a coat of armor. There was some armor made for a young prince that he could wear the livery of the kingdom, and it was small and it could fit the Hobbit. The Hobbit was grown but small, and so they gave him that. We don't see Saul going, we're going to find you some armor that fits you. No, he got his armor. Him being a head taller than everyone else, I'm going to put my armor on you. So when you go out there, you're not wearing anyone else's armor. They're going to see Saul's armor. This is the king's armor. Even in this, Saul is thinking of himself.
Yeah.
He's arrayed in the king's armor. The king has sent this one out. Oh well, look at Saul. And it would have been just as easy to find some armor that fit him. But no, he put him in his own. Now, and which of course the outward says, I'm going to give you the best as king. I'm going to give you the best, but I can't help knowing Saul that we've seen walking through these chapters. Saul's just out looking after his own interest. And David says, I can't use these. Verse 40. Then he took his staff in his hand, chose 5 smooth stones from the stream, put them in the pouch of his shepherd's bag, and with his sling in his hand, approached the Philistine.
This is new to me too. 5 smooth stones. 5 is the number of grace. Have you heard that before?
I haven't seen much into numerology and meanings behind. But it does show that.
It is the number of God, right?
Yeah. With
6
seven in Hebrew was a sign of perfection. 6 being less than perfect, and so that's where the 6 and the 7 come into interplay there.
Well, Satan's number is 666.
Dear God.
He gathered up the stones, and it's multiple, and so a faith would be 1, but we could say, well, he must have doubted. No, I think he came well prepared. That he knew it would be a great statement of faith, but it would also be a very conceited thing. He's like, I'm going to gather as many as I feel like I'm going to need that I can discreetly put in my bag, because as we notice, he said nothing about using a sling to Saul, because it was assumed that the Philistine and the Israelite would be in hand-to-hand combat. There were 3 major portions of an army. There was the infantry, hand-to-hand combat. The longest extent of offense that soldier would have would be the spear, and perhaps javelin. But that's about as far as the length of the spear. Then there would be the cavalry riding upon horses and upon chariots, and they could move quickly over distance. And then there would be the distance fighters, the archers and the slingers. He says nothing about being skilled in a sling. He says, I beat that bear with a stick. Because that's the terms of engagement for the Philistine. We don't have any mention of that, because Saul would go, well, that's not the terms of engagement. Wait a second here. And so he discreetly takes a handful of stones, puts them in his bag, and walks out with his staff. But here we have, this is his wheelhouse. Thy rod and thy staff give me comfort. As a shepherd, he has a rod, he has a staff, he has a stick, as well as a sling, so that he can sling a rock, well ahead of a sheep and say, okay, I'm not going to go that way. I can stay here and I can corral the sheep from where I am. If I see a wolf, I can whop that wolf from far away before it has a chance to. And so these are the tools of his trade, as well as being slings were used in long-range combat. The cavalry could move up quickly over distance and attack long range very easily, but infantry could easily take down the cavalry. Long-range fighters could completely decimate infantry, but were very vulnerable to cavalry. And so we have David looking at this going, we have someone who's going to come at me with infantry weapons. So I'm going to do the smart thing and use long-range weapons at him. But if I say anything about that, I'm going to get shut down. So he couches that with I'm going to come out there with my shepherd staff. And so he gathers these things and goes out. Verse 41, meanwhile the Philistine, with his shield bearer in front of him, kept coming closer to David. They're walking toward each other, and there's no stopping. He looked at David over and saw that he was only a boy, ruddy and handsome, and he despised him. He said to David, am I a dog that you would come at me with sticks? He has his rod, and he has his staff. Am I a dog that you'd come at me with sticks? He has no idea that boy has a sling. And so he calls him out. You're going to get me with your stick. You're going to hit me with your stick. I've got a javelin. I've got a spear. I've got a sword. I'm wearing armor. You're toast, kid. And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. Come here, he said, and I'll give your flesh to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field. David said to the Philistine, you come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will hand you over to me, and I'll strike you down and cut off your head. Today I will give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds of the air and the beasts of the earth, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. All those gathered here will know that it is not by sword or spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give all of you into our hands. What a speech, if not coming from a shepherd boy in a tunic with a stick.
Lack of faith is what people lack, that they don't cling to the faith like a mustard seed.
I mean, that is just bursting with faith. Just the confidence that says nothing about his own ability. That is where you see confidence really come into its own. The confidence that I am operating fully and completely under. It's the Lord that will defeat you. It says, shepherd boy David, no, the Lord's going to defeat you, and I will cut off your head.
I have a question.
You will be defeated, and I will cut off your head.
Where did David learn to have such great faith? Did they read stuff out of the Bible? Did the Father tutor them in that? Or, because most of the time a young child just, if he's just tending the sheep, how would he know this stuff?
We can certainly assume that Jesse is doing what he should be doing as far as teaching his children about the one true God. Mm-hmm. That at most would be the Pentateuch, and so that's at most that they would have. They would have the chronicles of what the Lord has done for his people as he delivered people out of Israel. He delivered his people out of Israel, and so it would probably be oral tradition passed down through the tribes of what the Lord has done. And that what the Lord did with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, and how generations ago the people of Israel were delivered by the Lord out of Egypt into the promised land. And that's why, we're facing down these Philistines. This is the land that the Lord has promised us. Jesse's doing what he must do, and David's hearing, and he's treasuring that in his heart, and he's keeping that. And there is such a strong faith that had to have come from somewhere.
Well, and they didn't have a lot of distractions back then with television or anything else to entertain
Exactly.
them.
And David, chief among these, from the day he's able to be out among the sheep, he is there. As the others have grown, they've done their time in the fields, yet now they're on to much more important things. Their responsibilities have grown. His entire life has been out watching those sheep in the solitude, no doubt, and he plays an instrument. So he's out there singing. We know he's skilled in writing, because even a tertiary glance at the Psalms of David, you're like, well, this person has talent. He's out there in the fields composing and taking care of sheep, and he's not reading the Pentateuch. He's not having the Pentateuch read to him. He's reading creation. He's seeing the sunrise and the sunset and saying, that's God.
Yeah.
He's seeing the sheep, the growth of the little baby sheep, and the passing away of the old ones, and the grass growing, and the movement of the wind, and he's going, God. He's seeing that everywhere. He's inspired by it. He's seeing things with his eyes open.
And feeling the strength that he had, at the time with just a stick to defend himself.
He defeats that lion, and
Yes.
he doesn't go, look how strong David is. He thinks, Lord,
Yeah.
I should have been eaten. I should have been kitty food
Right.
today, and I'm not. I am alive.
And he knew he had purpose at that time. Yeah.
So I think if we depart from the text for just a moment, if we encounter something in our life and we come out of that pretty well unscathed, we are still here, we're still present, we have a choice. I'd say perhaps three choices. We have a choice to look at that and be indifferent and just move on. That is a choice. Or we have these two polar opposites where we have, look what I did. Look at the strength of my arm that I have done this. And it could be something trivial, or it could be something very life-changing, but we could choose to say the self-decision. Look what I have done.
Yes.
How many of us have eye problems? I have eye problems. And I'm not talking about these jokers. I'm talking about, look what I have done. Or we could say,
You get away from that.
how true it is. How true it is. The perspectives of those who have walked before me, the farther they have seen, the farther their eye problems improved.
Or only your own experiences have proved
Yes,
over time.
Well,
the
the
more-
wisdom of a young man, though, is just
he's caught on much sooner than many of us did, because his is I have gotten into a fight with a bear and a lion, and I am alive, and it was the Lord who saved me. The Lord, and so now he has the confidence to say, he says to Saul, in Saul's language, I've defeated a lion and a bear, but in his own heart he says, I have faced a lion and a bear, and I say that it was the Lord that delivered me. This is not going to be anything. If I can latch hold of a bear and beat it with a stick because it carted off, I can do this because I'm justified. Because if it was just a Philistine saying, hey, come do this. But what got a fire under David is that he was going out against the Lord, that he was calling out the Lord's people and the Lord's army, and he was making it very personal, and he was like, I can't stand for that. And the fact that none of you are doing anything about it is making it worse. Now we can spend all day looking at David and the failures that he has done, but when we look at the things like this, we see such a difference between him and Saul, such a difference. And so he goes out there and does this speech, and not only turns back all the things that the Philistine Goliath has said. It's like, I'm not going to be feasted on. You and the rest of this army, I will feed your carcasses to the birds of the air and the beasts of the earth. And the whole world is going to know that there is a God in Israel. And upon that, verse 48, as the Philistine moved closer to attack him, Goliath gets into his battle stance. He is not just drawing closer, but he is going to charge and attack. David ran quickly towards the battle line to meet him. The Philistine is expecting him to go, oh my goodness, and turn tail and run. But the boy runs at him. The fool, that foolish little thing, I'm going to squash him like a bug.
Faith does not retreat, but rather runs toward its goal.
We're going to talk about that on Sunday, by the way.
Okay.
That's good.
Good.
Because we're going to talk about the breastplate of righteousness. So keep that. Verse 49, reaching into his bag and taking out a stone, he slung it and struck the Philistine on the forehead. You see, he's arrayed in bronze from head to toe, but there had to have been a point between whether, and so we're not quite sure of the construction, but we understand that there is a space in the forehead here, because to see, either he had something that was over his face, but there was an opening here, but the only exposed piece of Goliath that could do any good. He may have had a piece on the shoulder. That's not going to do anything. Hit him in the knee. That's going to make him mad. That a separation between the scale and the greaves that he's wearing, but that spot right there, that one little spot,
Yeah.
and he just had to have that faith, because you throw one rock, and that's your surprise. That is your chance. Otherwise, not only have you given away your advantage to the enemy, you've made him kind of mad. He was confident before, now he's just angered. But the Lord kept David's aim true, and the stone sank into his forehead, and he fell face to the ground. It wasn't a bonk. It was with strength. This little shepherd boy put some pepper in the gumbo. I mean, it hit him, and it remained there. We don't know the depth of the damage, but it was enough to where this big meathead, it stayed in the flesh, or it broke bone. He's struck in the head, and he is either felled and is close to death, or is he falls face down upon the ground. There is no bracing himself. It is an immediate response of being struck, and he falls face down on the ground. And so David triumphed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone. Without a sword in his hand, he struck down the Philistine and killed him. And so so David ran, and he stood over him. He stood hold of the Philistine's sword. He didn't go out there with a sword. He went out there with a stick.
Yeah.
You wonder how that sword, being as heavy as it was, that he was
It
able
had to be huge.
to draw it and
Yeah.
to cut off his head.
The power of God.
Yes,
Right, and
that
so-
was it.
And as I read this, I hearken back. He said, this day the Lord will hand you over to me, and I'll strike you down, and I'll cut off your head. What did David think he would use to cut off his head? He didn't even have a little pocket knife with him. But he said, I'm going to cut your head off. So there is a faith in that I've already, I'm going to see this through, because I know the Lord is already in this.
Yeah.
Just the unspeakable amount of faith. So he fells the giant, lays hold of the sword, drew it from its scabbard. After he killed him, he cut off his head with the sword. And so we see that he dispatches, he gives a mortal wound to Goliath, and then cuts off his head. He ensures, okay, I've not merely incapacitated him. And so he performs a mortal wound and then separates his head from his body, as a final sign, as a fulfillment. Well, I've said this, and it will come to fulfillment. When the Philistines saw that their hero was dead, they turned and they ran. They could have had superior numbers. They could have had superior tactics, skill, talent, strength, armor. They could have had all of this, yet they put everything on Goliath.
Yeah.
You 9-foot brute, we're all putting our hope in you.
And they saw the power of God.
Yes.
That's why they ran.
They witnessed a kid with a stick throw a rock at a man in head-to-toe bronze, and he fell flat on his face, who then was not, oh, I did it and ran away. The unmitigated Gaul approached him, drew his own sword, and dispatched him, and took for himself as a trophy the head of the giant. So they flee. They're terrified and they ran. And the men of Israel that wasn't, no, your champion said you would be our servants. Well, you're running away, and so you have not held your end of the bargain. We're not going to capture you as servants. We're going to pursue you as ones who have broken the deal here. But David kind of broke it first because rules of engagement, but that's kind of muddy.
I think this whole story just relates to them trying to stop the Messiah from coming through David. So if they slew David, then, but God had other plans, obviously. So praise God.
It's incredible how in this moment, how the trajectory of everything else that we have looking back, 2020 being, hindsight's 2020. How in this moment a giant could have felled him. David would have been a legend for standing up, and though he was dispatched, boy, we should be that kind of we should have that kind of strength and that kind of faith, even in the midst of certain doom. The line of the Messiah could have been broken. That there would have been no prophecy. There would have been no Messiah coming from the root of Jesse. Yet, against all odds, our logic, our odds, our human understanding, throw that out the window. God operates on a whole different plane than we do, and they run off. And so the men of Israel and Judah surged forward with a shout and pursued the Philistines to the entrance of Gath. So they ran to where? They ran to where Goliath. They're looking for more Goliaths. Hey, we came here the other day. We got ourselves a Goliath. You got any more of them? Because we need one. Goliath was from Gath, and so they run to the entrance of Gath and to the gates of Ekron. Their dead were strewn along the Saharaim road to Gath and Ekron. When the Israelites returned from chasing the Philistines, they plundered the Philistines' camp. David took the Philistines' head and brought it to Jerusalem, and he put the Philistines' weapons in his own tent. Now that last sentence isn't one that speaks of that immediate moment. We know that David didn't have a tent there at that moment, but this is to say, looking forward, that he collected for himself the head of Goliath, and when he came to Jerusalem, he brought with him that trophy. He kept the head. He kept the weapons. He drew that sword and he drug it along with him. And they were trophies, not to his own strength, but as reminders. This is what happens when you get off your hind end and you go out to the battle line and you trust in the Lord. And he didn't do so out of a foolishness, but he did so out of a confidence in the Lord. As Saul watched David going out to meet the Philistine, we kind of move back in time a little bit. We jump forward in time, David going and setting up when he had his own tent, going to Jerusalem. Now we move back a little bit. When Saul watched David going out to meet the Philistine, he said to Abner, commander of the army, "Abner, whose son is that young man?" Abner replied, "As surely as you live, O king, I don't know." The king said, "Find out whose son this young man is." As soon as David returned from killing the Philistine, Abner took him and brought him before Saul, and David was still holding the Philistine's head. I mean, it's gruesome and it's graphic, but it makes a statement. It makes a point.
Yes.
Bring him here. Oh, I see you have a little token there. Whose son are you, young man? Saul asked him. David said, "I am the son of your servant Jesse of Bethlehem." And so we've reached the end here, but there we have the telling of the Sunday school story we all know. I remember it being a bit more sanitized. There was no telling of, there's David with the head standing before Saul. But we see an image of faith unlike anything we've seen, I'd say, so far in Samuel. We've yet to see faith that said, "I have a stick and I have a sling and I'm taking you down, Buster." No, and it has nothing to do with the only bit of self-confidence is that I possess within my own self that I can do it. The Lord is with me. I can do it. A lion and a bear, I can do this. The Lord can do it.
1 plus God is a majority in any situation.
Amen
Yes.
to that.
Oh,
and
yes.
and with that, let us close in prayer.
Thank you.
Lord, you are mighty, you are awesome, you are far beyond our understanding. That the words that we seek to describe you and lift before you in praise, they fall so short. But we thank you that you receive it all the same. We thank you that you have blessed us with the opportunities that lay before us to exhibit our faith in you. That we can be people who are strong in faith and mighty in power, your power. That when we face obstacles in our way, that we know that we can overcome them, for we do not stand alone in this world. We stand in the power and in the presence of you, O Lord. Let us live lives that show that truth, that give us opportunities to not merely give lip service to this, but through our daily actions and through our daily thoughts and through our daily words, to be people of great faith in you. May you allow us to serve you all the days of our life. And may the words of our mouths and the thoughts of our hearts be pleasing to you. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Esther.